Hello, Big Chillians, and welcome back to the Big Chill Podcast. Joined as always with Eddie and Sam. So, boys, how are we doing so far in Cheltenham? What do we think?
It's been an interesting first 3 days. I think you've had a number of standout performances from different horses. I think maybe we can discuss for a second. I don't know what the performance of the festival is so far for anyone. And then two, maybe three major disappointments. And I guess the major disappointment of the festival being Envoy falling at the third today. I think that's the big shock so far. But overall, I think it's been a pretty high standard, some nice performances, some nice rides.
Yeah, I think it opened up quite nicely for favorite backers, didn't it, with the first two? Appreciate it. 9-10 clear, ran up the hill really well, goes straight onto Shishkin. Exactly the same as well. Must have been a great start until Constatista, and then Chacun pour soi, and then Envoy Alan. So it seems to have gone the other way over the past couple of days. But yeah, you must have been counting all your money with the favorite backers in those first two.
Yeah, the worm has definitely turned for heavy favorite backers. I guess you missed Honeysuckle there, right? Who ended up going off around even money and who also won easily. So yeah, that was that for anyone who did that first day fourfold.
Anyone, just randomly, anyone, not the three that happen to be talking right now.
the first three won with absolute ease. Now, I guess before we can say that we've had our performance has been pretty good. Anyone listening to us, they've had some good tips. I think, Frank, you've got a list of some of our better winners.
Yeah, so some of our better winners, we had Sir Gerhard. He went off at just a little under 3-1, I think. The shunter was about the same, right? 2-1, 3-1.
Yeah.
Galvin was 4-1, and our best pick was so far by Eddie, who tipped Sky Pirate at 16-1. Yeah, Eddie, how'd that 16-1 turn out?
Good performance. I mean, and look, there's also a number of horses that we liked last week whose odds subsequently dropped. Like Sam's been really big on Honeysuckle for a long time. So, if you'd been listening to us over the last couple of weeks, you would have got a little bit more value in some of those selections. But the question I'd like to ask you is, if you had been that better, that punter who had the fourfold, the £5 fourfold that everyone's been talking about, that in the end he did the partial cash out for £250,000 this morning with who was it with? Betfair. Yeah. Would you have cashed out? If you'd cashed out, would you have just sat on the money? Would you have rebet on something? What would your move have been?
Oh, I mean, I've got hindsight now. So yeah, absolutely cashed out.
Well, I was going to say, real quick for the American listeners, just quickly explain what is bet, not what it was, I guess, but what he could have won and what they ended up offering him.
I mean, it's pretty simple bet. It was just a fourfold, so a four-way parlay, I guess, for Americans. It had two horses racing in Royal Ascot. Both were double-figure odds, so they won back in June. And then he had Bob Ollinger as an anti-post, so from the bet placed back in June. I think he had it at
25-1.
25-1. And then he had, as the final leg this morning, this afternoon, he had Envoy Alain, who I don't know what price he got it at. I can't remember.
9-4.
9-4, and it went off 4-9. So he got value in both of his Cheltenham selections, and
Huge.
He stood to win 300 and
no, 500,
511,
something like that. Yeah,
and he cashed out for 250,000 with the possibility of winning an additional 50,000 if Envoy Alain had won. And in the end, it fell at the third. So he definitely made the right decision. The question is, his feedback was that he was 50% of the people he was asking were telling him to cash out, and 50% of the people were telling him to let it ride.
I mean, I guess what we don't know is who this person is, right? But we talked earlier off air, unless this person is a multi-millionaire, 250,000 is a large sum of money for anyone. And I can't imagine. And so actually, Eddie informed me of this that I didn't know, that in the UK, they don't take taxes off of gambling winnings, which is very different from what they do in the States. So that is a solid 250K he's getting. And for me, his reasoning for why he thought about staying in was because he's a huge Envoy Elan fan and he wanted to cheer it on. And I get that, like you want that intensity, you know, like it's riding on this race kind of feeling. But dude, come on, cash out for the 250. And if you really want, then throw some more money back on Envoy Elan to cheer on. You know, like why would you pass up an opportunity for £250,000? That's insane.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think in the end he made the right way of doing it, which was to still have sort of action on that race and to still feel invested, but then to have the security of having taken away a lot of money. The one thing I would say is,
it was the perfect result for him because he got to see the complete justification, but still had that, like, he could still watch Envoy Elan for half a mile.
Yeah. And here's the other thing too, right? Maybe, I mean, I think your net worth has to be tremendous for £250,000 to not be have a significant impact on your sort of day-to-day life. Like even if you do have tens of millions, just an injection of £250,000 from nowhere would allow you to do something nice. But given the fact that he was placing £5 anti-posts, I'm going to say he probably now he might be a multimillionaire who's incredibly sensible with his stakes, but probably not. And also unlikely he's hit this kind of bet before, because if he's regularly hitting £200,000 or six-figure wins and then still being patient enough to only bet £5, then again, this guy needs to be held as an example more of stake management more than anything else.
Yeah, and I mean, not that it really matters, but I would love to have seen how many of these bets he put in on that day before Ascot. Was it just like 3 or 4, or did he put in 50 different combos?
No, he put in, what was it like? He put in like
as long as
100,000.
Yeah, as long as he didn't put in 50,000, he's okay.
No, like not for that sense, but just to see, you know, like was this just like a one-off shot? You know, like he just had a feeling. I doubt it, but
you can't have just a feeling on anti-post. No. Like there's got to be something driving that. So he probably knows it. He's just, like Eddie said, he's just a good stake manager in terms of like, yeah.
Also, right, you've got to be someone who that plays into. That's like a tactic of yours normally. Like you're someone who throughout the year is doing anti-posts on like Royal Ascot, Cheltenham anti-posts. He's probably doing it constantly. The interesting thing, and we'll never find this information out, but when then talking about his stake management, how will this impact? Because if you've won £250,000 off a bet, for me, I think I would find it challenging now to be motivated by tomorrow putting a £5 bet on and winning £45.
Eddie, like this is how you lose it in a week.
Yeah, we're learning more about you than the psychology of the other person.
I think
I already knew that about him.
Oh, so did I, but our listeners may not have.
I think that's true of all people, though, right? Like it would be very difficult to suddenly, you know, you will have sort of raised the level of sort of dopamine and satisfaction you need in order to trigger that same level of pleasure.
You know what I would have done? If I had got 250K, I would have done something constructive and meaningful with like 200K. Like, I don't know, deposit on a couple of houses or bought a house if it's like in Blackburn or somewhere like that. But then use 50K, like you say, for the fact
I think he's
that
from
you are
Middlesbrough.
just going to have. So okay, so probably just as cheap.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's somewhere around Tyneside.
He could probably buy Middlesbrough.
Yeah, maybe he's a new owner of Middlesbrough Football Club. Could probably buy Sunderland.
That's unfortunate. You do get those examples, though, don't you, of like lottery winners that then buy clubs and realize how much money they lose because of it. I would just take like 50K of it and do £1,000 bets, knowing that you've done something with 200K of it and there's not a problem.
Yeah, but then the tricky thing happens when you blow through that 50,000 and then you're like, do I keep this going or do I go back to the house? Do I go back to the £5 stakes and hope that a few years from now I hit this again? That is the tricky thing. It would be really fascinating to talk to him 6 months down the line and see like how has this impacted your stake management.
He's going to get some. Didn't he tweet about how he only had like a couple of hours sleep thinking about it and had like a bottle of whiskey or something like that?
I don't know how it was that tough of a decision. Honestly, I don't. I don't get
If
it.
you had put 100K on and they had offered 500, it would be like, well, I have the money for that not to be too much of an issue. If you see my point, where it's £5, anything above £1,000, I would be considering.
Now, I don't know if you watched the ITV of Cheltenham today, but they actually had on, did you see that? A former stable worker of Nicky Henderson's yard, who a few years
didn't see that.
back, this is way better. I mean, this puts this other guy to shame. He, in 2012 at Cheltenham, he was working for Nicky Henderson and put in accumulator to win 3 million and won it, but they only gave him 1 million because of the restrictions.
It's the max payout.
Yeah. So they max paid him out at 1 million. He took the money, moved to America, and became a horse trainer like the following year. And they had him on. They interviewed him this morning on ITV, because they were saying how that other guy had won, and they said like, oh, we heard that you had a huge win back, about now like what 8-10 years ago. And he told about the win. It was during the Sprinter Sacre days. That was his opening leg.
Yeah.
That is impressive. I will say the one thing that interests me about that max stake payout, they shouldn't offer you, like it should never say on a piece of paper or say online that you have the potential to earn more. Like it should just be configured so it says 1 million max payout. Like this is, you can add other things in and we're not going to give you any more money. Because think how annoyed you would be if you're him and say the final leg of your bet had been an even money favorite. And so the most you could have won, you've already got to 1.5 million. It doesn't impact your winnings. And because they haven't told you like, no, adding this selection isn't going to change anything. And then you lose it. Like
from my bookies days, it did do that. It did like automatically just say 1 million and roll it up. But yeah, there shouldn't be the ability. I almost think poor form on him in a way, because how annoying is it that you have made selections to win more than you can and it then happen?
Because you could have separated into multiple bets too. That's the other thing you could do, right? It's max payout. From my understanding, it's max payout on a single bet, but you could have done, if you could have done three, divided into 3 different stakes and then done that, and you would have got the 3 million. And for someone who's working in the horse racing industry, it's not like the max payout of £1 million is a secret. And a couple of times a year, someone always gets mentioned for having the max payout incident. So you'd think you would be aware of it.
I wouldn't mind being the person that pays that out though, because the tips that would come in would be so good.
I would not tip them.
You wouldn't tip?
No way. I win £1 million. I'm not tipping some guy working in Ladbrokes.
Not even if they like drive around, get all the cash for you, work hours and hours and hours to do it. You wouldn't tip them anything.
No, Eddie would do the opposite. He'd buy the bet shop and then he'd fire the person.
Don't take bets like that anymore, you idiot. You're going to drive us out of business. No, I mean, look, if I felt like someone had put in the effort, like Frank and I, when we had that really good win at Royal Ascot once, and they had to go and collect because it was more cash than they had available, and they had to go and get that money and then bring it to us. In that instance, someone had put in more work than maybe their job would normally entail. In this, I don't think if you're getting paid £1 million, they're bank transferring it to you.
I bet you get 1 million and say, like, do you have a change for a 5?
I've never been.
Gives them a handshake.
Well, look, I'll say this:
pats on the back.
I'm a big tipper, but I'm not. I don't tip people in bookmakers. It's not been. It's just as a habit. It's not been one of the places I tip. I know that you, as a former employee in a bookmaker, used to get tips. It blew my mind every single time.
You used to get some fantastic tips.
You see it a lot at the casino. You see it a lot, like dealers and stuff.
Yeah. But I get that because they're interacting with you a little bit more. The only way, most of the time when I walk into a Ladbrokes or William Hill, like I'm not really interacting with that person. I'm walking out. The only way I would give you a tip is if you went, which I know you'll have examples of this, but if over time I felt like you were giving me preferential treatment somehow. So if you were helping me, like if an odds had just changed, but you're still slipping in from the previous odds, or if you're getting a bet and like a second after the race had actually gone off, but you're still putting it through. If that's going on, I'll tip you. But if it's just like you're basically a humanized machine, I'll leave it out.
Wow.
Anyway,
Great response, Sam.
on that note, let's hope that we're going to hit the max payout, because now we're going to move on to our day 4 picks. Try and give everyone a few winners here, see what we can hit. And hopefully some listener will tell us that they combined our selections in one way or another, and they're now moving to the US to open a stud farm. So
that means 2 things.
So with that, on that note, obviously, first up, we have the Jcp Triumph Hurdle. Very interesting race. On paper, looks like a 3-horse race, I suppose, between Zanahiyr, Quilixios, and Tritonic. Those are the market principles, and it's 14-1 or bigger for every other horse. So fundamentally, if it goes to form, it should be one of those 3. Frank, what's your selection?
So this is a tough one between Zanahiyr and Quilixios for me, but there's actually a really nice piece of form line between them, and that's St. Sam, who did really well yesterday, got second. And in that form line, Zanahiyr had beaten him by about 6 lengths, and Quilixios had beaten him by about 4 or 5 lengths. So they are pretty tight.
Quilixios.
Quilixios. Very tough one to say.
It doesn't roll off the tongue.
A lot of vowels. In there. But I've watched both the races, and the Zanahiyr race looked very impressive, and he actually was carrying more weight than St. Sam. So with that, I'm going to go with Zanahiyr.
I will say, I think before Sam goes, so I'm agreeing with you on Zanahiyr. I think it is tough to decide between the 2, because actually when you look through those through lines on the form, there's a number of horses they've both beaten, and the performances are pretty identical in a lot of ways. The only reason I'm giving the slight edge to Zanahiyr is because I think the jumping has looked slightly more reliable, and it looks like it's more adaptable to if the race is run differently, whether it can set the pace or whether it can kind of drop back in the field. And I'd rather have a horse that I think is adaptable in that sense. It is worth noting, I wouldn't be dismissive of Tritonic, just because it is the highest rated flat horse ever to make the switch to National Hunt racing. So in that sense, it is very much an unknown quantity, shown tremendous potential so far. And it could turn out that a year from now, it is by far the best horse out of this race. Now, I'm not willing to risk that on this race. And I'm very happy to kind of eat humble pie if it storms home. So I'll side with Zanahiyr. But that to me is actually the one I'm more concerned about than Quilixios.
Tritonic as well had a crazy turn of pace as a flat runner as well. So it'll be interesting in a short race like this, like a 2-mile hurdle, how that looks. I get it. It's a 3-horse race. Tritonic for a very different reason compared to Zanahiyr and Quilixios. But I'm going to side with Quilixios because as Frank mentioned, there's like a bit of a unifier in this race, that they all have gone against each other, and there's been horses that unify kind of that form. But I think there's a bit of like a value thing. Like both of them are only really exposed in Irish racing. And I just think for like the additional value of Quilixios at 11-4, when we were talking about it a couple of days ago, it's 4-1 as well. So that's kind of encouraging that there's money come. So I'm going to stay with Quilixios. I think out of the 2, it's a bit weird to say there's more value in a second favorite than a favorite, but I do think there's more value to be had there. But I just want to make a little shout out for Haute en Couleurs, if I've said that wrong, at 22-1, because it ran well in France in Auteuil in heavy ground, and it won in a grade 2, and it's massively stepping up here with Willie Mullins. And it just seems to me that he wouldn't have put this in the race if there wasn't some sort of chance. And I think the ground is only going to benefit. So it's just a little shout out. It's kind of an unknown quantity, but I think at 22-1, similar style of ground, won a pretty decent race. It could be something to look at, but I'm going with Quilixios to be my bet.
I like when you give, when we give shout outs to horses, I hope they they injured as well.
It's in the stable right now. Super pumped. Just listening to our YouTube channel.
What a boost. What a boost.
Worth saying, you can be encouraged by the money coming for Quilixios. It is being ridden by Rachel Blackmore. She has been the star of the show of the Cheltenham Festival so far. So there is every chance that that's just based on her success so far this week more than the chances of the horse itself. Obviously, in no way of knowing that for certain, but to me, that's the way I'm reading that particular kind of movement in the market. But you've given your summary there, Sam. How are you leaning for the county handicap hurdle?
The McCoy Contractors County Handicap Hurdle.
I mean, this is still just as difficult when we first spoke about it. When I spoke last time about this race, I looked at 50 ball of 14-1. And one of the reasons was that it ran well against Soaring Glory, who ran against Appreciate It. And I said, if Soaring Glory runs a good race, this could do well. Lo and behold, Soaring Glory did not run a good race. So it's drifted slightly in the odds. I think it's gone out about 2 or 3 points since that. But I still like it. I don't really have a problem with it. The Betfair Hurdle is a really good standard of race, and it lost to Soaring Glory, but it didn't lose badly. It ran well, ran on well, and it was in ground that suits now, soft to heavy. And I don't really have too much of an issue with it. Kind of Gary Moore, Joshua Moore, very sensible pairing for it as well, ridden it before, and before this, before the second, it had won a couple as well. So at 14-1, I still see good value here, and it's been pretty nicely looked after in the weights as well, because it ran the very competitive race, and it hasn't been hitting the handicaps as much as other horses would have been. So yeah, I'm staying with 50 ball.
Okay, I mean, my selection earlier in the week was Third Time Lucky. I'm sticking with that as well. Dan Skelton's won 3 of the last 5 renewals of this race. His stable's in good form. Third Time Lucky seems well handicapped. At 143, I think that's not prohibitive for it, and it has every chance. Difficult race to pick a winner, but I think at 8-1 still represents good value. And obviously last year it ran well behind Appreciate It. So that looks better now than it did at the beginning of the week. And previous good form at Cheltenham is always nice to see. So yeah, I'm sticking with Third Time Lucky.
Yeah, I didn't have much of an opinion on this the first time out, but I did like Champagne Gold in the last race. So I think I kind of have to give a shout out here to Champagne Gold, who's now racing in the 155. Again, it's another Rachel Blackmore. The price is dropping, but that's probably due more to her than any actual anticipation of the horse. So I think I'm going to stick with Champagne Gold. It's been super progressive. It's been up there, the last 4 or 5 races it's had, racing a lot of these other horses. It lost last time, I think, to Drop the Anchor, but now the weights are crazy different there in the handicap. So I also will give a shout out, though, to Petit Mouchoir at 33-1. A really good grade 1 horse in its day. Not a prolific winner, but always up there, always a name you always remember seeing in those grade 1s against like Shishkin and all those. It is up in the weights, but they have 7 pounds removed with the amateur jockey Jordan Gainford, who had a hell of a day today at a second and a winner. So, you got a good jockey getting some weight off. So I think there's a chance that it could get up in an each way at 33-1 is a pretty good price.
Interesting.
And switched yards from Gordon Elliott to Denise Foster.
So no agreement there for us. No consensus selection. Let's see if we all agree on the next race, which is another tricky one. You've got the Albert Bartlett Novices Hurdle. Statler is the 9-2 favorite. You then have Fakira at 5-1, Tory Graf at 5-1, Streets of Doyen at 7-1, Barbados Bucks, who I am giving 0 chance to, at 8-1, and all the rest are 10-1 or bigger.
What's this hatred towards Barbados Bucks? I don't get it.
It's not hatred. It's that I've watched it race several times this season, including on a couple of, I've had money on it at different times, and I've never been convinced by any aspect, by its jumping, which hasn't looked good. It doesn't seem to have a tremendous sort of cruising speed, not a great turn of foot. And it's one of those where I think it's basically because it's from, the lineage that it has and the price that it was paid. It was a 210,000 euro purchase. So that's a big purchase for any national hunt horse. I think it is being overpriced, and by that I mean too short of a price in races. It hasn't shown the necessary quality. And this, again, I wouldn't be going near it at 8-1. It would have to be 20-1 before I'd consider touching it.
So who is your selection then?
So my selection, this is my least confident race of the day. I will say that. I feel good actually overall about day 4, as I was telling the two of you beforehand. This is the one race where I don't have too strong of opinion, apart from dismissing Barbados Bucks. But I will be siding with 3 under through 5, which is currently priced at 10-1. Obviously in good form this season, I have it being 3 from 3, one going for a 5-timer in this race. I'm not going to say it's an absolute banker, but it's the one I like the most.
Okay. Well, so difficult race. I previously went with Adramel. I don't think Adramel has done anything wrong, to be honest, but when you actually look at its form and you look at the fact that it hasn't rained, I think Adramel probably needs more mud and it needs more heavy ground than there is at the moment. Like the ground has stayed good to soft. There's been very, very minimal, if any, rain. And I don't think it's going to happen. Looking at the forecast, I don't think it's happening either. So I'm going to jump ship and I'm going to go to Alaphilippe at 12-1. And the reason being is that its last run out at Haydock in very similar ground in a 3-miler, competitive one. It was a Class 1 novice. It actually got eased up as it won. It was about 4 or 5 out, watched the race about 4 or 5 out, jumped really handsomely and just kept pulling away progressively, so much so that he was able to just like kind of pull the reins on it and canter it over the line. So I do really like that. I think the step up won't be a problem. I think the ground suits as well. And I think there's a good bit of value at 12-1 there in what is a very competitive race, but a lot of good horses in this one.
Yeah, Alaphilippe was my selection earlier in the week, and I haven't sort of totally jumped ship. I think it's got every chance, and it will probably get thrown in one or two of my selections. Obviously, likely to be popular with any French bettors out there. As someone based in Paris, I know the popularity of Alaphilippe on the cycling circuit. So anyone likely to get some French support. Frank, where are you leaning?
Yeah, like Eddie was saying, this is a really tough one. I thought about jumping ship and going on to Statler just because, Mullins has been doing really well. But watching the race, it's not super impressive. It did beat Fakaria straight up in that race, so I wouldn't expect the form to be reversed there. But I'm going to try and find a little bit of value, and I'm going to stick with my pick, which was Streets of Doyen. It was on a 4-timer, and then it got dropped down. It was on a 4-timer on a 3-mile races. So right distance, doing well in the hurdle races. And then they dropped it down to a under 2-mile race. And it was no match for anything in there. And whether they actually did that purposely or just wanted to give it a little bit of a run for this race, which is kind of what I'm thinking. They wanted to, get some run into it and just prep for this race. So I think they have this in mind, and I'll stick with that bet at 7-1.
Okay, and then we turn our attention to the race of the day, potentially the race of the week, the Cheltenham Gold Cup, the kind of premier race of the Cheltenham Festival, I would say. Boum Photo is returning once again to see if it can defend its title. Personally, as any listeners will know from earlier in the week, I'm not in the Boum Photo camp. I think that it was slightly disappointing on his reappearance, and so at 3-1, I am not trusting it. It may well win. It obviously is, proven, but I'm going to be siding with Plutar, who I think when you look at the form of its last performance, looks even better now that Allaho won easily today. So the fact that it had Allaho back in 4th last time out that form has been franked. Not that it really needed to be. And I think at 100 to 30, 4 to 1, getting it around those prices, I think it's good value. And obviously, if it touches 4 to 1, you can even go for it on it as an each way bet. So that's my selection. The only question, I suppose, if it stays, so ideal distance is not quite as far as this, but its most recent performance did give the indication that it has more stamina than maybe previously thought. So rolling the dice a little there, but I've got confidence. Sam?
Oh, I'll go. Me, Boum Photo. I'm in that camp. I don't think anything was wrong and kind of just went through a couple of gears at Tremor in its run out. I just think they've set this horse up perfectly every time that it's gone to the Gold Cup, the last couple of times anyway. So doesn't need too much to say about Boum Photo because we know it stays. We know it runs Cheltenham. We know it only has that one outing usually as well before Cheltenham, sometimes goes to Punchestown after. But it's interesting that they're starting, they may go off kind of aligned at joint favourite. I see money's come in for A Plus Tard as well. So
maybe it's probably getting the Rachel Blackmore bump as well. So
it's interesting though what you say about stamina, because obviously this is the first time it's going up to any sort of over 3 mile trip. And when I was reading about it, because obviously you consider it to be the main competitor, but one of the problems used to be that it started so strongly and it was almost too fast. And that's really going to matter when you go into like 3 mile races. But recently, at the end of 2020, when it goes into these kind of 2 mile, 3 mile, 2 mile fives that it's run, it seems to have been held up a bit better. They seem to have controlled that a bit more and made it a bit more stamina. But I do worry against a horse that knows exactly what to do against 3 mile, against a horse that has run 3 mile once and the rest has been 2 mile, 2 mile five. That's the only reservation.
I'll say there, I think the Rachel Blackmore bump there makes sense, because if the one thing you can say about Rachel Blackmore this week is that she has been getting her tactics absolutely spot on. So I don't think A Plus Tard will lose this race because of tactics at all. I just think that would be, now whether or not it just doesn't stay, that's a risk, or if Boum Photo is just too good, also possible, or something else comes out from the pack, of course. But I have no concerns about that aspect of the race. Frank, what's your selection?
Yeah, I mean, this is the race, right? So for me, I got to stick
This is the race.
This is the race. This is the race of the day, race of the festival. I got to stick with Boum Photo. You know, exactly what Sam said, 2-time winner. They're training for this. They know what they're doing. I'm not very confident though in that selection. And I think I said this when we talked about it before. This is more a race that I would just like to sit back and watch than to really kind of have to be stressing out having a lot riding on one of these horses. I think A Plus Tard could win. I think actually Champ could have a decent shot. Second race after a wind up. It looked decent that last race. I mean, it's obviously was a really good horse. 1 second this year isn't going to change that. Another horse that way down the line that I think could have some each way value is Kemboi at 16 to 1. So Kemboi was just beaten by A Plus Tard in the last race in the final strides. So you're looking at a horse that is relatively right up there with the second favorite, and it's down at 16 to 1. It's also beaten Boum Photo like a year or two ago. It has not done well in the Gold Cup though. Last year it was way back, but it seems to be doing a lot better this year in its prep up races. So there's a shot that it could definitely hit the placings. You're getting 1 to 4. So at 16 to 1, I think that's really good value.
4 to 1, you mean?
The top 4 place.
Okay.
I'm saying top 4 plays. And I think,
okay,
you know, at 16 to 1, it can get up to top 4.
I was going to say, with that commentary, who aren't you backing?
Yeah. All right. We'll turn our attention to, before we've run through a list of giving the credentials of every horse in the Gold Cup, we'll turn our attention to the St. James's Place Festival Challenge Cup Open Hunters Chase. The way I have stressed the importance of certain words in that sentence makes no sense, but still it is. Billaway is the 11 to 4 favorite. Bob & Co is 5 to 1. It Came to Pass 13 to 2. Staker Wallace 8 to 1. And then you have the rest. Fairly open race. I think it's easy to make some kind of argument for almost any of them. Personally, I'm going to stick with Billaway. Hasn't done anything wrong this year. Raced well at Cheltenham last year. Equally, you have Staker Wallace as the fourth favorite. It beat Staker Wallace last time out fairly comfortably. I see no reason why Staker Wallace should reverse that form with Billaway. And so for that reason, top of the market, and that's where I'm sticking. And historically, as we addressed earlier in the week, this is a race where horses featuring at the top of the market have done well, even in what looks like fairly open races. Sam, what's your selection?
Stuck with Boum Photo here. I still think that there's still some doubts about its jumping ability. When it pulled up because of poor jumping. And there's actually been a couple of times, even though it's won its last three, there's been a couple of times where its jumping has been a little bit suspect, but a couple of them have excuses, horses interfering or unseating riders in front of it. I believe one of them was. I still think it's a really good horse. It runs off a high rating as well. It runs off for about 150, 155 on the Racing Post rating, which is nothing to be shunned at all. And even with that bad jumping, it still has a really good turn of foot pace to be able to make up for that, in the fact that it wins these good races, pretty decent races. So I'm sticking with Boum Photo.
Again, I'm sticking with Sam. I'm going Boum Photo as well. Pretty much exactly what Sam said. On the ratings wise, it has Billaway beat by a decent amount, which is surprising that Boum Photo is 5-1 almost versus Billaway at 3-1. It's won at this exact distance this year or last year. Again, second race after a wind op, so it might find a little extra gear in there. The jumping though is the issue, but I think it's going to stick to its winning ways here.
Wow, look how much you're boring Sam. He just can't stop yawning. God.
Well, let him go first. He takes all my picks.
Yeah. Next race, I'm going to be treat this as a really straightforward one from my standpoint. So next up, we have the Mrs. Paddy Power Mare's Chase. Elimay is top of the market. It's slightly odds on. You'll get it 4-5, 10-11 around that mark. Maybe you'll get evens in some places. To me, it's the horse of the race. Just beaten by Allaho last time out. That form obviously looks even better after today. Kind of second time I've mentioned that, obviously. But really, to me, if it doesn't lose, it's significantly disappointed, and something else has probably had to overperform. So simple for me, staying there.
Yeah, I agree with you. My only worry is that if that horse is that much of a banker, why is Mullins putting in Cole Reevy, who is a highly regarded horse as well, into this same race? And that kind of makes me a little nervous.
Do they have the same owner? They don't.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
So
but
then he doesn't.
Yeah, but I mean, I understand that. But at the same time, if he really thought Elimay was that great of a horse, he could sway the owner to maybe go into a different race.
Well, the problem with that one is you had Constantista in the other one. With Mullins in the three, there's not many mares races specifically to target. That's the problem here. So it's got to go somewhere. And actually, he might be using this to set them up for the year ahead. But I mean, just to do this, I'm going Elimay as well. We were tipping it up when it was odds against at the start of the festival on Monday, so like 4 days ago. And I don't see any reason why I would differ here. The interesting thing about Cole Reevy for me, and it's why it should be 4-1, is it's run at Cheltenham before and it doesn't run very well. It's run a couple of times and it doesn't seem to get up. It doesn't seem to, famous last words, but it doesn't seem to like stay at Cheltenham. It doesn't seem to go up the hill very well. And when push comes to shove, it just doesn't seem to find that extra bit. All of its form is in Ireland. So yeah, Elimay for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm also sticking with Elimay, but the only thing I wanted to say, yeah, just cut me off. I don't need to.
I mean, I thought you'd already.
Well, the only other thing I was going to say was you were going through that Allaho form. Cole Reevy on its last race beat Mount Ida by 13 lengths, and Mount Ida just won today.
Yeah, but not quite the same.
I understand that, but I'm just giving you recent Cheltenham form to go on.
Yeah, and it can be dangerous, right? Because most horses making it their way to Cheltenham and featuring at the top of the markets will have beaten decent horses on their way there. So it can be, you can make serious cases for almost any horse in the first 3 or 4 in the betting at a race at Cheltenham. But rounding off the week, then the Martin Pipe Conditional Jockeys Handicap Hurdle. Gentleman to me is top of the market at 3-1. Continues to be backed in. Earlier in the week, available at much bigger prices. Every chance that by the time people are listening, it's even shorter than that, or that by the time this race goes off, I could see it being 2-1, maybe even possibly slightly shorter if a number of other favorites have come in. That being said, it's clearly the unexposed horse in the market. It's a tricky handicap, but I think I would still take it at 3-1. I'd take it at this price. I wouldn't take it as being much shorter. When I wrote my notes on this, it was actually 4-1, and I said to myself, don't take it at anything less than 4-1. Since writing that, it's now 3-1, and I'm going to adjust that to the 3-1 price.
I'm going to go with Gabby-Naco in this one. The easy answer to that was it was third to Bob Ollinger in a graded race, and Bob Ollinger looked great. We keep going back to the recent Cheltenham form already this week, and that was a pretty impressive performance. So coming third off of that, I'm going to go with Gabby-Naco.
We're going to have very similar wins or losses tomorrow, Frank, because
it was third. It was third by about 10 lengths.
Still third.
I know, but out of 7 horses,
still third in a grade 1 to a horse that just went out and dominated
in a 7-runner field.
It's not. I don't think it's that bad form.
And there were 2 fallers. It was effectively 3rd out of 5.
I'm not
saying that, but I am like 3rd to Bob Ollinger can sound better than maybe it is.
Okay,
but
I'm going Gabby-Naco.
Join the club.
Yeah, I'm going Gabby-Naco as well, and slightly different reason to Frank, but it doesn't mean that his are any less credible.
It does.
Okay, it does. So the interesting thing was it was running well at 2 mile 4 in the last 2, and then they put it back down to 2 mile, and it ran pretty badly. It was kind of like essentially it isn't designed to be a 2 mile horse. It's a 2 mile 4, and it showed in that last race at Leopardstown. I also think that the heavy ground last time it ran out was a hindrance to it. And I think that the quicker trip, which has seen it kind of Naas Ferry House where it's run before, it benefited. So I think there's just a little bit more with Gabby-Naco. But about 6 of the horses that I even half fancied in this have already been ruled out because they've run in the previous part of the week. So I'm kind of just looking at what there is at the moment, which sounds obvious, but it wasn't my first pick. Snow Leopardess was, but they ran out on day 1. Yeah, seeing what else there is, I like Gabby-Naco for that reason.
All right, and I guess we round it off if you just say, what's your bet of the day? Sam, what's your I won't say stake your reputation on this time. Literally this time, what's your bet? It could be a double, it could be a treble if you were feeling very ambitious. What are you doing?
I think my nap is Boum Photo at 3-1. I think there's good enough value in it at 3-1. And I think you're going to have a good Gold Cup if you're on Boum Photo.
Frank, what's your nap?
I'm going to do Zanahiyr, Bob & Co, and an Elimay treble. So 2 of the odds-on favorites with Bob & Co. I think there's a lot of value in Bob & Co.
That is quite the nap.
I like it. No. I like it. Dare to dream.
Yeah, I'm going to choose a fitting nap. I'm going to choose Aplutar to put Boum Photo to sleep. That's my nap of the day.
Oh, he's going to kill it?
Maybe. It was more of a nap pun, Sam.
But, I get it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. On that note,
you're sleeping on the joke, Sam.
I guess anyone who's watching, if you've enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe, like and subscribe on YouTube, and you can also listen to the full podcast. Not all of which make their way to YouTube, so you can search for us on Spotify, or you can check the description. Actually, there'll be a link in the description. But if not, wherever you get your podcasts, search for the Big Chill Podcast and you'll find us.